My son said I was just a nanny and did not deserve to attend his wedding. I never thought I would be the kind of person to share something like this, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I feel like my whole life has been reduced to a single sentence, spoken by the one person I thought would always love me. My son, the boy I raised, the child I held when he was sick, the young man I supported through every challenge, told me I was just a nanny, and because of that, I did not deserve to attend his wedding. I cannot stop replaying those words in my head. They have shattered something inside me, something I do not think I will ever be able to repair. But maybe writing this will help me process it. Maybe someone out there will understand what I am feeling. Or maybe I just need to let it all out before it consumes me. I suppose I should start from the beginning. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Maggie. I am 62 years old, and for the longest time, I believed I had lived a good life. Not perfect but good. I worked hard, I loved deeply, and I did everything I could to provide for my son Daniel. Daniel is my only child. I had him when I was just 23, fresh-faced and hopeful, convinced that my husband and I were going to build a beautiful life together. But life has a way of tearing apart the things we hold dear. And when Daniel was just 3 years old, my husband walked out on us. He left without a word. No note, no explanation, just an empty closet and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. I remember staring at Daniel that night, watching his little chest rise and fall as he slept, and wondering how I was going to raise him alone. But I did. I worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family, and when Daniel was old enough, I started taking on nanny jobs as well. It was ironic in a way. I was caring for other people's children while struggling to make ends meet for my own. But I never let Daniel feel the weight of my hardships. I made sure he had everything he needed, even if it meant going without for myself. I packed his school lunches with care, attended every parent-teacher meeting, and spent nights helping him with homework even after long, exhausting days at work. Money was always tight, but we managed. When he needed a new pair of soccer cleats, I worked extra shifts. When he wanted to join a school trip, I picked up weekend jobs. And when he was accepted into college, I took on even more work to help with his expenses. That was when things started to change. College opened a new world for Daniel. He met people from different backgrounds, made new friends, and slowly, he started pulling away. At first, I thought it was natural. Children grow up, they become independent. But then he stopped coming home for holidays. He would visit his friends' families instead. His calls became less frequent, his messages shorter. I told myself he was just busy, that he would come back when he had more time. But he never really did. By the time he graduated and moved to a different city for work, I barely recognized the boy I had raised. He no longer introduced me as Mom. Instead, when he spoke about me to others, I was just Maggie, the woman who raised me. It stung, but I told myself I was overthinking. Then he met Sophia. Sophia came from a well-off family, polished, educated, the kind of woman who exuded class. The first time I met her, she was polite but distant, like she was assessing me. And maybe she was. Because after that, Daniel seemed even more reluctant to acknowledge me. When he announced his engagement, I was overjoyed. I thought this was my chance to reconnect, to finally be a part of his life again. But what happened next shattered me in ways I never imagined. When Daniel told me he was getting married, I was ecstatic. After all the years of distance between us, I saw this as a fresh start, an opportunity to rebuild our relationship. I imagined being involved in the wedding preparations, helping Sophia pick out a dress, maybe even offering advice on venues or catering. I knew I was not a high society woman like her family, but I thought my role as Daniel's mother would matter more than social status. I was wrong. The first sign came when Daniel told me they were planning an engagement party. I waited for my invitation, excited to meet Sophia's family properly and celebrate this milestone. But the invitation never came. When I finally gathered the courage to ask Daniel about it, he hesitated before saying, "It was just a small gathering, mostly Sophia's family and a few close friends. I did not think you would feel comfortable." I was stunned. Did he really believe I would not feel comfortable at my own son's engagement party? But I swallowed my hurt and told myself that maybe he was just trying to fit in with Sophia's world. Then came the wedding preparations. I tried to stay involved without overstepping. I asked Daniel if there was anything I could help with, even offering to contribute financially despite my limited savings. Each time he brushed me off with vague reassurances. "Do not worry, Maggie. Everything is under control. The wedding planner has it covered. It is going to be a very formal event. You might not enjoy all the chaos." Still, I held on to hope. Maybe he was just caught up in the stress of planning. Surely, when the invitations were sent out, I would be at the top of the list. But then I heard nothing. Weeks passed, and I watched as Sophia's family posted updates about the wedding on social media. Dress fittings, cake tastings, venue tours. And yet I was still in the dark. One evening, I finally confronted Daniel. I visited his apartment, nervous but determined to get answers. When he opened the door, he looked surprised, almost uncomfortable. "Maggie, what are you doing here?" I forced a smile. "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. I have not received an invitation yet." His face shifted, and for a moment he looked guilty. But then he sighed, rubbing his forehead as if I was a burden he did not have time for. "Maggie, look. This is really difficult to say, but Sophia and I decided to keep the guest list intimate." "Intimate?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "I am your mother, Daniel." He avoided my eyes. "Sophia's family is handling most of the planning, and it is a very high-profile event. We did not think you would be comfortable in that kind of environment." I felt my stomach drop. "You do not think I would be comfortable? Daniel, I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And now you are telling me I do not belong at your wedding." He sighed again, this time with frustration. "Maggie, it is not like that. It is just people would have questions. You know, about your background, your job. Sophia's family, they have certain expectations." "Expectations?" My voice was barely a whisper now. "What are you saying?" And then he said it. "You were more like a nanny than a mother, Maggie. You took care of me, and I will always appreciate that. But this wedding, it is just not the right place for you." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. My own son, my flesh and blood, saw me as nothing more than a caretaker, a hired hand, not a mother. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I swallowed my pain and forced myself to stand tall. "If that is how you see me, Daniel, then I will not argue. But do not expect me to pretend this does not hurt." He said nothing. He just looked at me, expression blank, as if he had already moved on. I turned and left. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at the old photo albums I had kept all these years. Pictures of Daniel as a baby, grinning up at me. His first day of school, holding my hand so tightly. His teenage years, laughing as we watched movies together. Had all of that meant nothing to him? Had I really just been a nanny in his eyes? I did not know what hurt more. The fact that he had excluded me from his wedding, or the realization that I had lost him long before that. In the days following that conversation, I felt hollow. I moved through my daily routine like a ghost, the weight of Daniel's words pressing down on me. "You were more like a nanny than a mother." I replayed that sentence in my head over and over again, each time feeling a fresh wave of pain. I tried to tell myself that maybe he had not meant it the way it sounded. Maybe he had been pressured by Sophia's family. Maybe he was just ashamed of where he came from. But deep down I knew the truth. The son I had raised, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, had discarded me like an old relic that no longer fit into the life he was building. I had no intention of reaching out to him again. I told myself that if I was not wanted, I would not force my presence. But fate had other plans. One evening, as I sat alone in my small apartment, there was a knock at my door. My heart leaped, foolishly hoping it was Daniel coming to apologize. But when I opened the door, I found an unfamiliar woman standing there. She was dressed elegantly, her hair styled to perfection, and I knew immediately. She was from Sophia's family. "Margaret, is it?" she asked with a polite but distant smile. I nodded, confused. "Can I help you?" She let out a small sigh, as if this conversation was something she was obligated to have. "I am Sophia's mother. I wanted to come by and speak with you personally." I stepped aside, allowing her in. She looked around my modest apartment, her eyes scanning every detail. I could feel the silent judgment radiating from her. She sat down, crossing her legs gracefully before speaking. I wanted to clarify something about the wedding. I felt my body tense. There is nothing to clarify. Daniel already told me I am not welcome. She gave me a practiced, almost rehearsed smile. It is not about being welcome, dear. It is about appearances. Our family has a certain reputation, and we have to be mindful of how things look to our guests. I clenched my fists. And I do not fit into that reputation? She did not even hesitate. Not exactly, no. I took a slow breath, trying to control the storm brewing inside me. So, you came here just to make sure I understood how unworthy I am. She waved a hand dismissively. No, not at all. We just wanted to offer you something in return for your understanding. That was when she pulled out a check. A large check. More money than I had ever seen in my life. This is for you, Margaret. A token of appreciation for everything you did for Daniel. Consider it a thank you for raising him so well. I stared at the check, my stomach twisting in disgust. They were trying to buy me off. They wanted me to disappear, to stay silent, to not embarrass them with my existence. I looked up at her, my voice steady. Tell me something. When Daniel was sick as a child, who stayed up all night taking care of him? She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Well, you did, of course. And when he struggled with math in school, who spent hours teaching him? She shifted uncomfortably. You. And when he was scared of thunderstorms, who held him until he fell asleep? She sighed. You did. I leaned forward, looking her directly in the eyes. Then tell me, do you think a nanny would do all that? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I pushed the check back toward her. I do not want your money. I do not need your approval. I may not be good enough for your family, but I know exactly who I am. I am Daniel's mother. And if he cannot see that, then it is his loss, not mine. For the first time, her expression faltered. There was something almost like respect in her eyes, but it did not matter anymore. She stood up, taking the check with her, and left without another word. As the door clicked shut, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The pain was still there, but so was something else, clarity. I had spent years defining myself by my son's love, but I realized now that my worth was not tied to his validation. I had been a mother, a damn good one. And if Daniel could not see that, then he did not deserve me at his wedding. The wedding day came and went, and I was not there. I did not check social media for pictures. I did not wait by the phone for an apology that would never come. I simply carried on with my life, as if it were any other day. But the truth was, my heart ached in a way I could not put into words. No matter how much I told myself that I was better off without Daniel, that I deserved more than to be treated like an afterthought, there was still a part of me that grieved. I grieved for the little boy who used to hold my hand so tightly, for the teenager who would sit with me on the couch and talk about his dreams. I grieved for the son I had loved with every fiber of my being, who had now cast me aside as if I were nothing. Days turned into weeks, and I threw myself into my work, trying to find solace in my routine. I had spent my entire life caring for others, and perhaps it was time I started caring for myself. Then one evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there. He looked different, not just older, but heavier somehow, as if he were carrying a weight he did not know how to put down. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost did not hear it, he said, "Maggie, can we talk?" I stared at him, unsure of what to feel. "Why are you here?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I did not know where to start. I stepped aside, allowing him in. He walked into my small apartment, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. I wondered if he was comparing it to whatever grand estate he had moved into with Sophia. I sat down across from him, folding my hands in my lap. "You said what you needed to say, Daniel. I do not know what else there is to talk about." He swallowed hard. I messed up. I let out a bitter laugh. "Which part are you referring to? Not inviting me to your wedding? Telling me I was just a nanny? Or letting Sophia's mother try to buy me off?" His face crumpled in shame. "All of it." For the first time since that awful conversation, I saw something in his eyes that had been missing before, remorse. "I thought I was doing what was best," he admitted. "I was so caught up in trying to fit into Sophia's world that I lost sight of what really mattered. I shook my head. No, Daniel. You did not lose sight of it. You threw it away. He flinched, but he did not argue. I know. And I hate myself for it. Silence stretched between us. I wanted to believe him. But the wound he had left was too deep to simply be erased by an apology. Why now? I finally asked. Why are you here after all this time? He hesitated before answering. Because it did not feel right. I thought that once the wedding was over, once I had fully stepped into my new life, everything would fall into place. But it did not. Instead, I just kept thinking about you. About everything you did for me, about how unfair I was. And when I looked around at that wedding, at all the people who were supposed to be my family, it felt wrong that you were not there. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You did not just forget to invite me, Daniel. You made a choice. You chose to pretend I did not exist, because I was not good enough for your new life. He buried his face in his hands. I know. I was selfish and ungrateful. I wish I could take it back, but I cannot. For the first time in weeks, I truly looked at my son. He was not the boy I had raised anymore. He was a man, one who had made mistakes, one who had hurt me deeply, but also one who was sitting in front of me now, trying to make things right. I sighed, my voice softer now. You cannot undo what you did, Daniel. And I cannot pretend that it did not break my heart. But if you truly want to fix this, it is going to take time. He nodded quickly. I will do whatever it takes. For a long time, we just sat there, the silence between us filled with years of pain and regret. But there was also something else. Hope. Maybe our relationship would never be the same as it once was. Maybe I would always carry the scar of his betrayal. But for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that this was not the end. It was a beginning. Rebuilding a relationship is never as simple as saying, I am sorry. Words can be spoken in an instant, but wounds take time to heal. And while I had spent weeks telling myself I did not need Daniel, that I was better off without him, the truth was he was my son. And despite everything, I still loved him. But love alone was not enough. Trust had to be earned. The weeks that followed Daniel's visit were filled with cautious conversations. At first, I kept my walls up. I was polite but distant, unwilling to let him back in too easily. I had spent too many years sacrificing for him, giving him everything I had, only to be discarded when I no longer fit into the life he wanted. I was not going to let that happen again. Daniel seemed to understand. He did not push, did not demand forgiveness overnight. Instead, he called more often. He would check in just to ask how my day had been, something he had not done in years. He started sharing pieces of his life with me again. Small details, nothing grand, but enough to remind me of the boy he used to be. And then one evening, he showed up at my door again. I opened it to find him holding a box. Inside was a framed photograph, a picture of the two of us when he was just a child. It had been taken on his first day of school. He was grinning, clutching my hand tightly, while I knelt beside him, my face filled with pride. I found this in my old things, he said quietly. I forgot how much I used to love this picture. I traced my fingers over the glass, my heart tightening. I remember that day. You were so nervous about school, but you held my hand the whole way there. He smiled a little sadly. Yeah, I did. For a long moment, we just stood there, both of us lost in the memory. Then, he cleared his throat and said something I had not expected. Sophia and I are expecting. My breath caught in my throat. You are having a baby? He nodded. A little girl. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. And I do not want to make the same mistakes with her that I made with you. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Daniel, I know I do not deserve to ask for anything after what I did. But I want her to know you. I want her to have her grandmother in her life. I could have let my pride keep me from answering. I could have reminded him how much he had hurt me, how easily he had tossed me aside. But in that moment, looking at my son, really looking at him, I saw the truth. He had learned. Maybe the scars would always be there. And maybe a part of me would always remember the way he had once turned his back on me. But he had come back. And he was trying. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Then let us do this right. Together. He exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath, and gave a small, relieved nod. As I stood there, holding the picture of our past and the promise of our future, I realized something. I had spent so long believing I had lost my son forever. But maybe, just maybe, I had found him again. And this time, he was the one holding my hand.